Chapter 4. Cap. 1 month later. Cap lurked in the trees west of the Drakovich de Bouclier manor. A cold wind caused the overhead branches to scratch against each other. Tilting his head back longingly, he wished he could feel it blow across his face. Half the freedom of living in the forest disappeared when his hood shrouded him. But he was too near other people. He couldn't risk someone recognizing him or describing his face to General Valentin. A twig snapped to the east. Cap set a hand on his quiver and pressed his back against a tree. He was expecting company, but unwelcome guests could be deadly. "Must we discuss this right now, Jean?"
"When should we discuss it, Marielle?"
Jeannot rumbled.
"That woman is dangerous."
"She isn't," Marielle protested, clearly frustrated. After a pause, she continued. "All right, I grant that she has the potential to be dangerous, but so do you and Cap." Stepping into the open, Cap crossed his arms over his chest and tilted his head toward the pair.
"Whom are we talking about?"
Jeannot glared at his companion, not his usual expression for his black-haired sweetheart.
"Margit, Marielle's new house guest."
Cap raised a hidden eyebrow.
"The general spy who put a hole in your hood about a month ago."
The memory of that disastrous day rushed back.
"She's here?"
"She's not a spy," the young woman insisted. Casting her eyes between them, she said, "Margit is a friend of mine. She came to me for help after a bandit shot her and stole all her belongings."
"I didn't."
He cut himself off, remembering the horse that had chased after them when they fled, with full saddlebags and the satchel that Rouge had lashed to the pommel, and the fine bow that had still been tucked into the sheath on his back. A flicker of guilt made him look away.
"I was in a bit of a hurry escaping the trap she helped set up. I didn't mean to take her things."
"I understand," Marielle replied with strained patience. "Now, can we move past this?" Cap considered her, feeling again his hood flying back and the hard flight with a pack of guards on his tail.
"I don't recall hearing about Margit before. Who is she, other than your friend?"
"I'm sorry, Cap," she sighed. "I promised I wouldn't say more than that, but believe me, I'm in no danger from her."
"Did she tell?"
"Yes, she explained why she was injured when she arrived," Marielle said waspishly. "And for the record, she wasn't trying to hurt you."
"Looked to me like she was trying to hurt him,"
Jeannot chimed in. "She was trying to take off your hood, not your head." Pressing a hand to her forehead, Marielle closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I'll grant that she's a bit impulsive. She admitted it wasn't her best decision. But I suspect you didn't come all this way to hound me about Margit." No, they hadn't. Lifting his right hand to play with the fletching on his arrows, Cap said,
"Jeannot heard a few things when visiting the capital, and I hoped you could provide more information."
"I imagine I know the topic." Her black eyes darkened. "I'll tell you everything Mother and Daphne told me." After exchanging information, Cap and Jeannot bade Marielle farewell and began their long trek back to the camp and the rest of Cap's little band. Marielle had urged them to wait out the impending snowstorm, but he wasn't willing to trap himself at her estate. He didn't trust everyone on her staff, and he certainly didn't trust her house guest, despite Marielle's assurances and Jeannot's willingness to believe them. Since it was a 2-day hike, they set up a temporary camp that night, then set out as soon as it was light the next morning. After a few hours, the snow began to fall, drifting through the treetops while the wind howled above them. The frozen flakes pelted their faces when they left the shelter of the trees. Cap took the lead, breaking a path through the deep snow in the meadow. His muscles began to ache. His face was half frozen, and he still had to climb down the steep drop-off on the other side. But the trees were just ahead, and it wasn't much farther from there to the camp. They were almost done.
"Should I help?"
Jeannot asked as they stumbled out of the wind. He sounded a little less tired than Cap felt.
"The snow will make the descent harder."
Cap leaned against a chilly tree trunk. catching his breath while he peered over the edge. This was the shortest route to Marielle's, but he wasn't fond of this part.
"If you're up for it,"
he finally replied. He looked over his shoulder at his friend.
"We still have to walk the rest of the way."
Shaking the snow off his cloak, Jeannot stripped off one of his gloves and pressed his hand against a tree. He didn't need the physical contact to work his magic, but it was more efficient when it didn't pass through clothing or the air, and right now, efficiency was crucial. At first, nothing appeared to happen. Then, the roots sticking out of the drop-off wall thickened and slithered out of the snow, curling in to provide sturdier hand and footholds.
"Go ahead,"
Jeannot grunted, his eyes closed as he leaned into the tree.
"I'll follow and release them as I go."
Arguing would waste time and Jeannot's strength, so Cap lowered himself over the edge. The magic-laced roots were sturdy and dry, allowing him to climb down the wall as if it were a ladder. Jeannot waited until Cap was 10 feet down, and then slid his hand along the trunk to the ground as he began his own descent. Cap had often been grateful for his friend's strength and skill at plants magic. He couldn't express how thankful he was now. Once they were both safely on the ground, Jeannot pulled his glove back over his reddening hand. Cap eyed it with concern, but the camp was close. The warm fire at its center would solve the problem. But before they'd gone a quarter mile, a piercing shriek split the air behind them. Jeannot looked at him in alarm.
"Who else would be out in this weather?"
Cap didn't know, but it didn't matter. Spinning on his heel, he ran through the trees, eyes roaming for the trouble. As he neared the drop-off, he saw a bundle of cloth under a 10-foot-high bare spot on the snowy slope. Forcing a little more speed out of his tired body, he sprinted the rest of the way and slid to a stop next to the crumpled form. He knelt down, panting in the cold air, and froze at the side of the person huddled on the snow, one arm spread to the side, and chestnut waves falling over her face.
"Is she all right?"
Jeannot gasped as he jogged up.
"Where do you think she came from?"
Cap stared down at the woman, then gently brushed the hair aside. Her nose was redder than Jeannot's fingers, and her pained gasps puffed past chapped lips.
"She's unconscious,"
he finally answered. He ran his fingers over her head, checking for bumps.
"And she followed us from Marielle's estate." "What?"
This woman had shot an arrow at his head. She'd distracted him from a passel of the general's guards who had come uncomfortably close to capturing him. She'd tracked him from Marielle's house. But the sight of her now, hurt and helpless, twisted his heart just as it had when it had been his fault. It didn't matter whether Marielle was right about her. Cap couldn't leave her. Sliding his hands under her, he carefully scooped Margaret into his arms. Her head lolled back.
"Jeannot, could you make her more comfortable?"
His friend stared at him for a moment before stepping forward and carefully tilting her head onto Cap's shoulder. Folding her left arm across her lap, he declared,
"Almost perfect. Bend down so I can wrap her other arm around your neck."
Cap blinked at him.
"Why? Isn't that the proper position for a damsel in the hero's arms?"
Jeannot replied with the biggest grin his frozen face allowed.
"She would certainly be more comfortable that way."
When the woman in his arms shivered, Cap shook his head and forced his tired legs to move. Margaret was only going to get heavier.
"Nothing?"
Jeannot asked as he trotted after Cap.
"No response at all?" "Your remark was too absurd,"
Cap replied calmly.
"I couldn't think of anything." "Cap, that woman is not light, but you're planning to carry her over rough terrain for at least a mile,"
the other man pointed out.
"And I thought you didn't trust her." "I don't." "Then why?"
Cap looked over at his friend, then dropped his eyes to the woman in his arms. He hadn't taken the time to assess her injuries, but he could see by her face that she was in great pain.
"She needed help,"
he said simply.
"And there was no one else to give it."
Snorting, Jeannot reached for the token under his shirt.
"I'll send a request for someone to meet us. If you carry her the whole way, we'll freeze before we reach camp."
Cap only half listened. Rescuing her didn't make sense, not if she worked for General Valentin. But Marielle had claimed her as a friend. and he'd never been good at walking away from someone in need. She whimpered, a soft, pitiful sound, and shifted in his arms, reaching out to grip his cloak with one hand. He forced his eyes back to the path. Rouge would patch her up, and then he would return her to Marielle. Margot was a distraction he couldn't afford, even if he could trust her. The end. Hear the rest of Cap and Helena's story in Arrows and Gems, available now in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. You have been listening to Arrows and Assumptions, an Arrows and Gems alternate POV meet-cute, written by Aaron Halbmeyer, performed by Elaine K. Schultz. Print and audio copyright by Aaron Halbmeyer, 2025.